Now, before we get into the rest of the video, we have to thank the sponsors. The first one is Hammy of Hammy Prints. He is a friend of the channel now and a personal friend of mine. He makes over 2,500 different products, including kill flashes, light covers, cheek risers, and his newest thing is mag wells. He also makes a cool little battery holder that you can hold like 2 CR123s, a couple AA's, AAA's, and even some little coin batteries, so check that out. He also makes a bunch of different display mounts for walls like pegboard, drywall, grid wall, secure it, variety of different others as well. So if you're looking to mount your blasters up on the wall, Hammy's a way to go. Or if you just want to set it on a table, he also has magwell display mounts as well. So go check out Hammy, he's a good friend of mine. You know, in Vietnam, guys had the red night vision, and there's stories of them seeing into other dimensions potentially with the red night vision. Well, the second sponsor for this video is DNT Optics. Here I've got their Therm Night Scope, which is their multi-spectral scope that includes both thermal and digital night vision. The thermal has 4 different color palettes you can choose from, and the digital night vision allows you to be able to put the scope into picture-in-picture mode, where you can choose either to see thermal or night vision on the big screen, and then a little window you can have the other one, whatever you choose. The night vision is for identifying what you're looking at, and the thermal is obviously for picking up those heat signatures. This model also includes a IR flood and a ballistic range calculator with a whole bunch of bullet data that you can choose from. This model also has a little throw lever to make it real easy to switch in between different zoom levels and whatnot. You know, as the future of warfare gets more and more scary, you start to see thermal used on the modern battlefield quite a bit. And affordable thermal like the scopes from DNT, I think are definitely worth your time. So go check them out, and thank you DNT for sponsoring the video.
I gotta level with you boys. The Battlefield 6 beta is out right now, so we're gonna try and wrap this up and be done with it relatively quickly. So welcome back to the channel. I'm gonna take this flak vest off because it's like 1 gazillion degrees out here, and I hate my life every day that I live here. Actually, I actually dislike it very much. And that's not me LARPing as a Vietnam GI, that's my real thoughts. So I wanted to touch base. I feel like it's important for YouTubers to touch base with what made them, if that makes any sense. It sounds kind of corny, but like, you gotta touch base with your roots. You got to pay respects to the tradition, I think. Where my logo comes from and everything, it's from the hat, the Born to Meme thing, because I had a very distinct vision in my mind. I kind of wanted to base the channel off of like almost like a Black Ops vibe is what I was going for. Ever since I moved out here, I'm originally from Arizona, so having trees and jungle foliage like this, reminds me of Vietnam. So I was like, immediately, I was like, I need to get me some kind of Vietnam gun to make videos, because I had planned on making a YouTube channel back in 2022, and I was unsure which direction I wanted to take it. I actually did have, in like 2021, I thought about making like the M16A3 and like making a video on it. I eventually ended up doing that, but when I moved out to where I currently live, which is in the south, I was originally planning on getting a XM177 clone from Brownells. Now in 2022, when I came out here, that was when the retro world, the old style of vintage rifles, it was hard to come by those parts. The popularity of these older ARs was at an all-time high, and the supply for them was at an all-time low, because if you remember, those of you kiddos might not remember, but us older remember that after 2020, it was really hard to get a lot of these parts, and Brownells, they had the retro thing going on like 2018, 2019. It kind of underperformed because it was really expensive and it wasn't really clone correct, so there were a lot of issues with the Brownell stuff going on, and they stopped producing full complete rifles, and they still sold parts for a little bit, but there was this gap of time between Brownells stopping production and H&R starting that we were just in limbo trying to look on the secondhand marketplace. Occasionally you would get something in stock, like Luth would, you know, there'd be an in-stock notification on Reddit and everybody would be like, oh, Luth has got C7 uppers, like everybody go, and they'd be sold out in like 10 minutes. So it was hard to find some stuff, and people were charging crazy prices for it. But this is when I decided to jump into it, and I said, you know what, I want to go with an XM177, a little Car 15. I ended up buying a barrel from Brownells because they did have like a 12.7, I think is what it was, 12.5 barrels or 11.5, something like that. And I bought the flash hider as well, which I ended up selling because I ended up finding this gun, which is the M16A1. Now, long-time viewers of the channel already know the story, but I make this video every single year. It's kind of like a tradition. So for a lot of the newcomers, there's a lot of people that aren't in on the lore, so I will give you a lore rundown, and my OGs can skip past if they want. But the lore rundown on this is I called pretty much like every store around me, and I was like, I need to find something, because I was trying to build out this commando. You know, I was calling a bunch of different stores. I was like, hey, I'm looking for something like this, these kind of parts. You guys have any of that? And most places didn't. But I called one particular gun store, and they were like, yeah, we got an M16A1 upper. And I was like, whoa, for real? And they're like, yeah. I was like, okay. But it was like on a Saturday, and they would close at like 3, and I didn't get off work yet. So I was like, dang, I'm gonna miss it. And the next time they opened was on a Monday. So I told my wife, I trained my wife, I was like, all right, here's what you need to look for. Okay, this is a C7, this is an A1, this is an A2 upper. We want the A1 upper. She's like, okay. So, because I was at work on Monday morning, so she ran over to that gun store like first thing and snagged it. It's not a very busy one, but I was like paranoid. I was like, there's an actual, you know, A1 upper over there. Like, I need to verify this information. She got eyes on it. She was like, yeah, it's good to go. And then she took pictures of it too, sent it to me. And all it was the upper, the barrel, no gas tube. It came with the slip ring. It had a front sight base, front sight post, but it did not have a flash hider either. So it was just a barrel. He charged me $400 for it. So for the upper and the barrel at the time, it wasn't like a steal. It wasn't like getting ripped off. Considering this is an actual Colt, you know, M16A1 upper, I was pretty happy with it. And then I just built out the rest with some surplus grip, stock, and triangular handguards. Right now it's not on this, but I'm gonna restore it eventually because this is on loan to me from a friend. Thank you, Matt. I will give it back to you. So I had to go and, ooh, there's a little ant on my lower here. Yeah, picked up the furniture from US Collector Ordnance, and then I snagged the lower from H&R. This was like the first or the second wave of lowers that had launched, because I've been watching Mike's forum very closely, and I was like trying to snag one of these because, you know, to complete the build. These lowers, the gray is not produced like this anymore. They look a little bit different. I don't know if that's true or not because I haven't seen any H&R gray lowers. But from what I understand, there was like something going on. There was a ton of blems in these early runs. Like, you were getting more blems than you were non-blems, because the process for gray anodizing, from what I understand, is like very complicated, and the receivers can often turn out to be like green if you do it wrong. So it's a little more tedious and it's more difficult than just doing a straight black anodizing. So from my understanding, they're not this gray anymore, which this color matches really well, I think, with the original Colt gray. As far as the upper actually goes and how that guy came into possession of it, again, longtime viewers already understand what I'm saying here, or they've already seen this. But the story that I got was that the National Guard had given the local police department M16 uppers for whatever reason. And during the Obama years, I guess ammo was in short supply, and the local law enforcement was looking to get some ammo. So they went to this gun store and they said, hey, we got a bunch of these M16 uppers that we will trade you for ammo. We're upgrading to some other things. Will you take these A1 uppers in exchange for some, you know, 5.56, 223? And they did, or I guess it could also have been 40, or just whatever ammo, it wasn't specified, but the guy took him up on it, and I guess he had a bunch of these uppers, and I ended up snagging the last one like 10, 12 years after the fact, which was pretty neat. So the story is that apparently this is I think when I looked at the markings before, it says CH right here, and then it says CMP bore, chrome bore. The markings indicates like a mid-70s kind of, you know, upper, but the story is that it's a legitimate M16A1 from the National Guard. They went to the PD that ended up going into that guy and then into my hands. So it's lived a good life, and I've treated it well. Of course, I like to get it dirty and still shoot it and whatnot, but it's good to go out and shoot these old guns and whatnot. I'm not gonna like do any torture tests or anything on it, but I do appreciate the historical significance of it. And I guess I can tell myself that this thing was like used in Vietnam or used in some CIA op, I don't know, before it was given to the local police. So that's pretty much the gun here. And the way I got it currently set up is with the M203 heat shield. This is a USGI legitimate one. It feels way different than I thought it was. I thought that in my mind, I pictured them to always be metal, but it's like a plastic. And then there's a heat shield actually inside that's aluminum, just like you would get on normal handguards. And then this is an airsoft M203 that I have attached with some paracord. I'll probably show in some B-roll what that looks like because it's kind of interesting. It doesn't work. I've actually never shot a airsoft grenade out of this thing, so I don't know if it even works or not. But I also want to say the kit has gotten a little bit better as well. So back in the day when I bought this stuff for this video, I didn't know anything about Alice or M1956 gear, so I just bought Alice suspenders, like a Y suspender, and then a, you know, Chinese pistol belt. And then I did buy the canvas pouches, which I still have. These are reproductions. And I did buy the canvas butt pack, which is also a 1956 reproduction. So that I kind of got, you know, I did that well. But the canteens I got were Alice at the time. So I've since upgraded. So up top, I guess I'll just talk about the base layers. I have these mud boots on right now because I'm not going to put the Vietnam boots on for just sitting out. I didn't even fill my feet, so whatever. And the Vietnam boots I have are like all black ones, which I think are like 80s, 90s style anyway, the jungle boots I have. At the top, we got the helmet, the iconic helmet, the Born to Meme. This was just a little Amazon M1 I purchased. It's probably not even accurate to what it was actually used in Vietnam. And then since then, I've upgraded to this is actually an Israeli flak vest. It looks a lot like the M67, I want to say, or whatever the Vietnam flak vest was. This looks a lot like it, but it's an Israeli clone. It's not the same one. And then we did end up getting, this is a legitimate surplus 1956 pistol belt, And then the base layer is just a true spec Vietnam outfit that I forget what the nomenclature is. I'll throw it up here. But that's pretty much the kit. You know, I try to look a little bit better. I don't have the canteens anymore. I removed the inaccurate ones. I probably need to get like the legitimate canvas 1956 ones with the aluminum, whatchamacallits. And then I probably need like 13 more ways to store ammunition, including canteens, because I read stories of guys, you know, stuffing their canteen pouches full of these little 20-round magazines when they were going out in the jungle for, you know, extended periods of time and stuff. So that's pretty much the kit, guys. And I did wrap my arms too for the video because that's like Bad Company 2 Vietnam style. All right, let's get on to the rest. So that's pretty much the gun. I'm not gonna give you a historical rundown. I did do on my second one, I think I talked a little bit about the history of the A1, and I get some stuff wrong because there's kind of like that misconception that I don't know if it's necessarily a misconception. There's a guy, Ivan Prince Guns, he did a video on the history of the M16A1 because Windagoon came out and he said, hey, the US military was intentionally sabotaging the M16s in Vietnam, which led to, you know, deaths. They were giving them no cleaning kits, poor ammo. They were chroming the bolt carriers instead of the chambers and the barrels. You know, there was things going on that seemed malicious and whatnot. Upon some new information, thanks to some guys that I know in my Discord, Ivan Prince Guns, I watched that video and the guy basically breaks down that there's no proof that it was intentional, that the generals in the government were trying to intentionally sabotage the M16. They may have not liked it, but it's kind of a harder thing to prove is kind of what it boils down to. Now, in my mind, it still kind of makes sense that there was some bias, even if it's not provable bias. I feel as if, you know, it makes a lot of sense to me that these generals, these old heads that fought in World War II in Korea using the M1 Garand, you know, why wouldn't they inherently favor the M14? Because they would make the same justification that they make today, which is, hey, you know, when it comes to the Army picking a new gun, what do they say? Oh, you know, the reason these bullpups and some of these strange guns don't win these contracts is because, oh, well, this other gun is close enough to an AR-15 that's going to be easy for troops to train on. And I'm sure that that was the same case for the M14. That was the same thought process. The FAL being a foreign gun was never a serious, you know, they never had a serious shot. But the M14, you could certainly see some people being biased to that gun because they're stuck in that old style of thinking of, you know, battle rifle, traditional iron sights and whatnot, target sights that shoot out to, I don't even know how far the M1 or the M14 sights shoot. And then something like this being a very new age gun with aluminum and plastic, you could certainly see that there may have been some biases. Now, was there, you know, intentional, I guess maybe the argument would be like, was there intentional malpractice where it was like, yeah, we're going to get these troops killed to further our agenda? I think that's a much harder thing to prove. It's easy to look back maybe and maybe come to that kind of conclusion, but I don't know if that's necessarily rooted in any fact. I mean, once they got the gun figured out, which, you know, the M16A1, they chromed, if I'm not mistaken, the chamber and the barrel, and then the bolt carrier group was not. They used to chrome them and then they stopped doing that. And that led to a lot of reliability increase. Does that maybe make sense? Because of the humid conditions and whatnot, these guns were getting worn out, and I've read stories of guys like dead with them trying to, like, it's clear that they were struggling with a rifle before they died. Could be a training thing. There could be a whole bunch of, there's so much like, it's like FUD lore, and I don't even know what you would call it when it comes to the M16. There's still some old guys out there to this day that they don't like AR-15s because of the very early history in Vietnam. Once the troops that got into, I think it was 1968, once they started to get the M16, they liked it. You know, the good one, the good M16 and whatnot. And even early on in Vietnam, before it really had a lot of problems, there was a lot of good reports coming out. In, like, I want to say 1963, 64, people were saying, hey, this new little rifle is lightweight, we like it, and whatnot. There's all the controversy about the sights and the forward assist and all that. You know, I'm not really one way or the other. Forward assist seems like it doesn't bother me if it's there. If it's not there, whatever. I guess I'd rather have it and not need it than need not have it is kind of my opinion on it. And then I think unanimously people kind of agree that moving from this to the A2, the sights are better on the A2, but moving the full auto feature, which this is a semi because obviously, you know, ATF, giving the A2 burst instead of auto would kind of hurt the platform and whatnot. I guess my guys I've never shot a full auto A1 or an A2, or a burst A2, so I guess those of you that have been in the military, maybe some of you that even went from the A1 to the A2 could speak to that a little bit more. I've heard that the trigger pull is greatly affected when you are shooting the gun in semi-automatic with an A2 because of that burst setting. It does something weird to the trigger. There's videos and stuff like that. But again, I don't have no first-hand experience on that, so you guys can sound off in the comments if you have any idea. As far as magazines go, I just bought 3 Brownells mags. I've had them ever since. I had some problems with these mags a while back where they wouldn't fit, and I guess, you know, they worked really well at one point, and then I shot the gun a bunch, and then they got really jammed where they would not fall freely. This almost falls freely now, but you'd have to rip these things out like with a lot of force to get it removed. And I've used them again, and they've kind of broken back in, and they've reverted back to how they first were, and they fit again. So I guess Brownells, the story is, good job, Brownells mags. I also have a 25 round mag, which is like 57 bucks. You can't even get them anymore. I got them when they were still being produced. But the 25 round mags, they were in Vietnam from what I understand, but they're pretty few and far between. As well as the 30 round mags, you start to see that more in like the 70s, early 70s and whatnot. Guys running some 30 rounders, but for the majority of the war, you're seeing the 20 rounders. You wouldn't really see the A1s equipped with the 30 rounders until 70s, 80s, right, before the implementation of the A2 and stuff. So just want to keep it simple, guys. I love this build. One thing I noticed, there's a friend of mine who works at a gun store here, and he sent me a picture the other day. He messaged me and he said, hey, we just got an H&R rifle in. I thought of your channel and everything. Isn't this pretty cool? And, the picture was blurry, and I looked at it and I was like, oh, that's pretty neat. It's a black anodized gun. I was like, what's the price tag say? And he was like, $12.49. And I was thinking to myself, whoa, that's like $250 too expensive. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure this thing's used. You guys got this thing used. Like, that's pretty steep. So I went on PSA's website and looked, and sure enough, they're $1,300 new now. So the local gun store has it for $50 off. I was thinking to myself, like, bro, that's really steep for an A1 in my opinion. I just feel like that's not a right price. Maybe that's just inflation or people trying to capitalize on the retro hype that's been all the rage for the last few years, but I think $1,300 for this is just too much, especially if it's not an actual like old SP1 or a Colt. At that point, you might as well just save up a little more and just go look for an old SP1, because $1,200 seems pretty dang steep. I might as well buy a Mark 18 upper for that kind of money, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of stuff you can get for 13, and most people, if you're not like really dedicated to it and you just want like a fun gun to shoot, that's going to deter a lot of people, I feel. There's obviously other manufacturers besides H&R that make these things now. There's a ton more. I'll list them all here. And H&R, I would probably say, is the most clone correct. And you're literally getting, like, Harrington and Richardson is literally back. They did make M16s during the Vietnam War. They're back now, and they're actually making A1s again to like the same specifications, minus the full auto. So you are getting like an actual M16 from H&R. It's like if Colt had started to make them again on like the original tooling and stuff. So for that, I do kind of understand. Although I don't necessarily know if H&R is original tooling, but it's going to be your most clone correct is what I'm trying to say. But if you're just looking to scratch an itch, there's plenty of other manufacturers, like BKF makes an A1. You can go check them out. And then I'm really skipping. Retro Arms makes one. And you can find some old Colts here and there. Parts kits are a little bit harder to come by now. Like Apex Gun Parts used to have a bunch of Colt stuff, and that's pretty much dried up. Gun Broker, I would kind of urge you to stay away from because that stuff is pretty stupidly priced. But, for this gun, I probably had about 7 to 8 Benjamins in this when I built it out. So it was four Bennies for the upper. The furniture was probably about another 120, so we're talking like 520. Lower parts kit, we'll just call it 100. So what are we at? 720. Bolt carrier, I think I did buy a bolt carrier, so there's another 100 something. Charging handle, whatever. So probably between 8 and 9 is what I ended up paying for it. Lower, of course, as well as like 150, 160. So yeah, I got it for under 1,000, and I actually have a Colt upper, which I'm pretty happy about. So those days, I guess, are kind of gone. I'm not sure. It's kind of we're just in a weird situation with everything, economy and gun market and everything like that. Hopefully, as people are starting to have like less, not hopefully that they're having less income, that's not what I mean, but people have less income, disposable income now, because things are just the economy's gone to the toilet. So hopefully these AR manufacturers start to bring their prices down to compensate for that, because we are in the Trump slump 2.0. I'm not the first person to talk about it. There's been like a gazillion YouTubers already talking about how the Trump slump is a real thing and all these manufacturers are kind of suffering. So, PSA might be too big to fail. They're like gun Disney at this point, but it would be nice to see some of these guns fall in price, because $1,300 seems like pretty steep to me. I think the original Brownells guns were about that much in 2019. They weren't nearly as clone correct, but they didn't really sell because they were too steep. So, and that was during a good economy. But I appreciate you guys sticking around watching the video. Again, this video was just kind of touch base, do a little yapping. I just like this gun, and I got a new lens for my camera, and I shoot on S-Log now. I have a Sony camera. I'll shoot on S-Log 2 because it's an older Sony. So I know how to color correct a little bit better now. I know how to set up shots and edit a little bit better. So I decided, why not try and do this video again? And I'll do it again next year, of course, if we're still doing this. If we're all still here, I will be making a video again. Maybe by that time I'll have a nice suppressor and an actual OG retro, legitimate Colt scope. Would be kind of cool. I know they make that suppressor now. It's kind of like an AEM5, but for the M16. That'd be a kind of a cool video, I think, to do. But I appreciate you guys sticking around watching the video. But I gotta go and I gotta play a little more Battlefield 6. I honestly spent too much time yapping, so I hope you guys enjoyed and have a good rest of your day.